afternoon, everybody. Is that working? Oh. Huh? Is that working? Yeah. Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. Great. Yeah, I just want you to say hi to me. Thank you guys all for being here on a very cold. I didn't know we were supposed to get snow, but here it is. Happy winter. Thank you all for being here. I'm Lawrence Snyder, president of this club. Thanks for being here and celebrating our weekly celebration of service. I do want to thank Steve Ingle for greeting us all, and then also roundabout reporter Judy stepping in for Kyla today. Thank you, Judy and Steve. I want to invite Jim up for our pledge in reflection. Jim.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you. I don't know if winter's come early or the weather just simply confused. But maybe this will give you a little food for thought as to what to do if we're stuck inside. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. I know I am at times. As a former social studies teacher and as a result of training and inclination, I read mostly nonfiction. Magazines such as The Economist, Bloomberg Business Week, and newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times fill my reading time. I realize not always happily or fully. So armed with a Barnes & Noble gift certificate, I found an old friend, Tony Hillerman. He wrote this book about 40 years ago, but that doesn't matter, since there was a timeless quality to his writing. His writing set in the Four Corners region of the Southwest. He takes me to a different time and place. In his mind, like all artists, we share a vision. His story of life, people, and places are very different than my own. It existed in his imagination, and now it exists in mine. Good for him, good for me. You may want to try it sometime.
Thank you very much, Jim. I would now invite Joe Darling up, our newest member, by the way, to introduce guests, but I don't believe we have any guests today, which is very rare. But Joe, thanks for volunteering. He's just diving right in. All right, our Rotary family birthdays this week. We have Ron Barnes, which was yesterday. Ron, is that right? Happy birthday, sir. And then Jerry Pajak we have on the 30th. So Jerry, happy birthday to you in advance. Membership anniversaries, Michael Sherman, 7 years. Does that sound about right? Then we have Nancy Kruger, 11 years. Brian Price, 28 years. Scott Walters, 30 years. Kay Leach, 30 years. And then Keith Klein, 33 years. So, wow, a lot of membership anniversaries this week. All right, our 12 months of service for November, we completed the telefund. Art, thank you, and those who volunteered. I know Jim and Ann and Sarah all volunteered doing that. The Bloomington, Indiana resolution that we submitted to Rotary International, it was 18R31. It was submitted through District 6580, and it read, to refresh memories, to request the Rotary International Board to consider increasing opportunities for women, young leaders, and people of different races and ethnicities to serve in district, zone, and Rotary International leadership positions. This was adopted with 304 yes, 192 no, and keep this in mind, 28 of 55 submitted resolutions were actually denied. So this one was approved. So many kudos to Mike Baker and Sarah Laughlin for putting that together, and that is now applicable to Rotary International. So thank you to Sarah and Mike for putting that together for us. Seemed like something that should have been there, much like women should have been in Rotary long before 1987, but there has to be a time for that to change. So thank you, Sarah, and Mike. Our holiday party, please put that on your calendars, is Wednesday, December 12th at Bloomington Country Club. at 6 p.m. It is not December 18th. So Bloomington Country Club on December 12th. And we have some entertainment with Jim's help as well as Alon putting together, and Jean and Joy helping coordinate the details. So thank you guys for doing that. Please mark your calendars. Now I want to, is Susie here? I think I saw Susie. Susie, happy dollars. And guess what? We have a portable mic that we're going to test out, which will let everyone be heard very clearly. No.
Oh.
You're our news reporter.
I'm going to start with my own happy dollar. Today's Giving Tuesday, which is a time when each of us can go in and impact a nonprofit organization of our choice. I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. So, Steve.
Thank you, Susie.
Well, I'm very happy because it's not even December yet, and already 21 members of the Bloomington Rotary Club have signed up to ring the bells for the Salvation Army at College Mall on one of 4 Saturdays in the month of December. We only need 11 more volunteers, and we will have our 32, which means 2 Rotarians per shift over the 4 Saturdays. So anyone that is so moved to sign up today, see me afterwards. I've got the schedule, and I'll go in on Sign Up Genius and do the work for you. Or if you want to wait a couple of days, it'll be in, the link will be in the roundabout. So thank you to all who have signed up, and I hope another 11 will come forward. Thank you.
Well, I'm just happy that I'm able to go home and take a nap this afternoon so I can watch the Duke game, the whole game tonight.
Thank you. I bring you greetings from the Rotarians on the island of Cuba, where the first club outside the United States was established 100 years ago. Now, I didn't get to go to the actual club meeting because I didn't have one of these 1955 Chevys or Fords that they are all around the island. Go and visit Cuba. The weather was perfect. The beaches were wonderful. And we did some service work as well. But it's a wonderful... Show more your shirt. Oh, show my shirt. Here we go. Here we go. Anyhow, we did some wonderful service work. Maybe we can talk about it later. But thank you.
I'm happy because the Courtfish House was named Hoagie, apparently by a big margin.
I wanted to do $1 for Giving Tuesday. I didn't have $1, so Michael gave me $1. So this is from Michael.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you have some?
Here, there you go.
Another $1 for Giving Tuesday.
I'm happy because I was able to make a trip to Chicago last weekend with a group from Meadowood, and we saw Hamilton. But what really made me happy was being able to go to the old Marshall Field, which is now a Macy's, and to see how they celebrate the holiday season. It reminded me of many, many years before. Thank you.
I did the same and bought my Frango mints.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so yummy. Okay, you take the money.
I wanted to share with everybody, I had the most amazing experience this morning when I went to my gym and I was leaving. I stopped by the office and I said to this lovely young woman, "Do I know you?" And she looked at me and she smiled, and I said, "Are you?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Basketball?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "And Tyra Buss." I went, "Oh my God, I feel like I met a movie star." Anyhow, Tyra's back in town. Greece did not work out for her. There was a lot of kind of questionable stuff going on, but she's still hoping to play professional ball.
I think that's it. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Susie. We'll just keep the meeting going on remotely. All right, now I want to ask Leslie to come on up and introduce our program for the afternoon. If I can put this back.
All right, thank you. It's good to be able to have today's program. I don't know that we'll like everything we hear because there's some things that we need to be thinking about as a world, as a community. I just heard last week that a sperm whale was washed up on the beach in a national reserve in Indonesia, but yet it had hundreds of pounds of plastic in his belly. So we know that there's problems with plastic out there, and we need to be thinking about that. So I called over to SPIA, and I got a hold of Sarah Mincy, who agreed to speak with us today about that. It's a topic that's been of great interest to me. Sarah is the director of the integrated program in the environment. She has both a master's and a PhD from Indiana University from the SPIA program, but she also has a BA from Morehead State University, which is her home. She is a social ecological systems scientist who studies community-based natural resource management and environmental governance with particular interest in urban forestry management. So I shared with her that we had actually been a part of urban forestry in this past year when we planted our 90 trees around the community. In her current role as faculty of the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, she serves as the director of the Integrated Program in the Environment and administrative director of the IU Research and Teaching Preserve. She maintains much of her research activity through her affiliation as research associate with the Vincent and Eleanor Ostrom Workshop in Political Theory and Policy Analysis and the Environmental Resilience Institute. So quite a nicely credentialed person, and we're delighted to have you here today, Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here to talk to you today. Let me get things set up here. In her June 2018 story for National Geographic, Laura Parker writes, "If plastic had been invented when the Pilgrims sailed from Plymouth, England to North America, and the Mayflower had been stocked with bottled water and plastic-wrapped snacks, their plastic trash would likely still be around 4 centuries later. If the Pilgrims had been like many people today and simply tossed their empty bottles and wrappers over the side, Atlantic waves and sunlight would have worn all that plastic into tiny bits. And those bits might still be floating around the world's oceans today, sponging up toxins to add to the ones already in them, waiting to be eaten by some hapless fish or oyster, and ultimately, perhaps, by one of us. We should give thanks that the Pilgrims didn't have plastic." Given that we are here only a few days after a holiday in which we reflect on said Pilgrims and give thanks, I thought this was a fitting opening to our conversation today. And also because much of the information that I'm going to present to you today comes from and is inspired by Laura Parker's work for National Geographic. And you should look into that. There's a wonderful website that they've developed all about plastic, from which I've garnered much of the information. I was asked to speak on the problem of plastics, and really it probably should be the problems with plastic. The topic is one that you are likely somewhat familiar with, and perhaps more familiar than me, actually. I am a systems scientist and not an expert in plastics, rather trees. But systems scientists are notorious for applying their analytical framework to lots of things that they know very little about. So bear with me, because this is my burden as a systems scientist. And after all, Edwin Meese mused, "An expert is somebody who is more than 50 miles from home, has no responsibility for implementing the advice he gives, and shows slides." So I've got 2 out of 3, right? Seriously, another reason that I wanted to come talk to you today is because of my role with the integrated program in the environment here at IU, or IPE. It's a mouthful to say, Integrated Program in the Environment. You should all know about IPE and the really exciting work that we're doing. Basically, in 2012, the provost gathered a group of faculty and asked them to come together and report on new academic directions for the campus. And, I should move on to my IPE slide. And out of that faculty committee, there were many suggestions that we should move forward on. And one of them was that there needed to be a program office that would bring together and represent all of the environmental scholarship that was happening at Indiana University, regardless of department or school. And this was the beginning of the integrated program in the environment. So we are supported by the School of Public Health, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the School of Public and Environmental Affairs, and we work under the auspices of the provost. And we have 140 faculty from across campus, even outside of those schools, in fact, across 10 schools now, that are affiliated with IPE, and thousands of students who are working with us. We're doing really exciting work. We manage the only 2 joint degree programs on this campus, joint in that they are offered by 2 schools, SPIA, the School of Public and Environmental Affairs, and the College of Arts and Sciences, and that's an environmental science degree at the undergraduate level and a sustainability studies degree at the undergraduate level. We were responsible for bringing together IPE-affiliated faculty, which led to the Prepared for Environmental Change Grand Challenge that the university awarded $55 million to invest in preparing this state and beyond for the changes that we're experiencing given climate change. We also engage youth from across the state and beyond in programming that exposes them to environmental and sustainability scholarship and hopefully attracts them here to IU. We just had our Youth Environmental Leadership Summit, the first ever. We hosted it at SPIA, had 100 students from high schools across the state come and focus on environmental problems from their own communities and finding solutions to those problems that they could take back. We also have, we run a summer camp that's for underrepresented youth, so low-income, minority, first-generation college students, so that they can come here during the summer for free and understand how they can be a part of scholarship related to the environment and sustainability. So that's all to say that if I can't answer all of your concerns or questions about plastics today, I have at my fingertips 140 faculty and thousands of students that we might draw upon. So I want to give you a bit of an overview of a presentation. I want to first address a popular perspective on plastics. It's a kind of a popular topic right now. I want to go into a systems framework for deeper consideration. So this is the way I think about environmental problems. Then we're going to unpack the problem together. I have an assignment for you. I am a teacher, so you're going to do an assignment. And then I want to talk a little bit more about how this is not just a story about ill-managed trash, and then we'll talk about solutions. The turtle and the straw. If only this slide introduced to you a little-known Aesop's fable, but it doesn't. Instead, you may recall this year's surge in popular attention to the problem of plastic straws. And it was thanks in part to a graphic viral video shot by a marine biologist who extracted virtually unrecognizable plastic straw from the nostril of a live and very uncomfortable sea turtle in Costa Rica. It garnered more than 30 million views on YouTube alone. The straw movement received a major bump from this coming out back in 2015, but then it really resurged again this summer. And it's kind of working, this kind of social media push towards addressing the problem. Many cities have passed or are in the process of passing resolutions and all-out straw bans. Seattle just enacted its ban on plastic straws and utensils. UK Prime Minister Theresa May has proposed to ban plastic straws, drink stirrers, and plastic cotton buds by the end of 2018. Starbucks has also declared that it will abandon plastic straws by 2020 in favor of sippy cup lids that are plastic and compostable plastic straws. So is this reptilian poster child revealing the full picture of the problem with plastics? I don't think so, and I think that's what we need to talk a little bit about. Our subsequent bans on plastics, the silver bullet? Maybe not completely. So let's take a closer look at this with a systems perspective. So a systems framework is basically the idea that we have to look at all of the component parts of a problem. And this is pretty common for anybody who thinks about environmental problems. Environmental problems are inherently social ecological systems problems. And you heard Leslie say that I'm a social ecological systems scientist. So I think not only about social science, but also environmental science. And I have to bring those together to think about solutions for environmental problems. After all, you know, scientists generally agree that there is no ecosystem on Earth that is untouched by humanity, right? We have touched every ecosystem. I mean, do you know what geologic epoch we're in today? You've probably heard of the Pleistocene, right? Do you know what era we're in? Anthropocene, thank you. Some might say the Holocene, that was this, the most recent one, but now geologists are saying we are in the Anthropocene, anthropo meaning human, right? And so our actions have so significantly changed nutrient cycles, they're so clearly linked to the 6th mass extinction of life on Earth that we are infamously the namesake of the current geological era. This is to say that no ecosystem operates only by natural laws anymore, but through influence of human institutions. And likewise, human institutions are intricately linked to natural laws. And a specific system framework is useful for us to understand environmental concerns. Do you recognize this face? I'm sure many of you do. Eleanor Ostrom, Nobel laureate in economics, IU distinguished faculty member, director of the Ostrom Workshop, and a grandmotherly advisory to many a student, including myself. She developed the social ecological systems framework. And we're going to dig into this in a second. Basically, Lynn worked across the globe to think about environmental problems from a systems perspective. So she worked with people from all different disciplines. And she realized they had so many various ways of approaching environmental problems from so many different angles. They often had very different language as well. So they couldn't come together because they were coming from different places and speaking different languages. And so the social ecological systems framework is this very broad framework that sets out variables that we should think about when we're trying to resolve an environmental problem. So I realize you may not be able to see this very well, but this is the SES framework. At the top, right under the title, it says social, economic, and political setting. At the bottom, in parallel, it says related ecosystem. So in a specific context, we have a set of variables that interact and produce outcomes. And we can define those outcomes as simply sustainable or unsustainable. There's, of course, other ways you could define outcomes, but this is useful for us today. And the sets of variables that interact are, on the left-hand side, resource system, resource units, on the right-hand side, governance system, and actors. And let's unpack those a little bit. I guess I could say one way you could simplify this is to say that all those things on the left are biophysical variables. On the right, the governance system, institutional variables, the rules and the strategies that we use to govern, and social. A lot of the social characteristics or variables of the people involved. So let's unpack it. The biophysical variables that we might want to think about. What are the number of units involved? So maybe the number of trees is something that I would think about in my research. What's the economic value of those units? What are the spatial and temporal distribution of those units? What's their growth and replacement rate? Or likewise, in the case of plastics, we might think about decomposition rate. What are the human constructed facilities that are at play? The storage characteristics, the clarity of the boundaries of the system. Those are all variables that are, or they're sort of subset variables of those bigger characteristics on the biophysical side. On the social side, under actors, we would want to think about the number of actors, the socioeconomic characteristics of those actors, their social norms, their understanding of the system, their history of the use of the resource, and the importance of that resource to them. And on the governance side, Government is a part of governance, right? But also non-governmental organizations are a part of governance. Property rights, rules, like I suggested earlier, and in particular, how we monitor or enforce those rules. Okay, so I'm digging into a lot of nerdy stuff. Let's just simplify it. Under specific social, economic, and political settings and certain ecosystems, biophysical, social, and institutional variables interact. They produce outcomes, which we're going to call sustainable or unsustainable. And I want you to think of those sets of factors as themes that cut across our consideration of the unsustainable outcomes we're observing in regard to plastics. And I'm setting you up for an assignment, okay? I want you to watch this video that Laura Parker helped produce for National Geographic. And while you watch it, hopefully it works, I'd like you to think about what they're reporting to you in terms of the variables that are interacting, that are biophysical, social, and institutional, okay? So let's get down here to our video.
Plastics are being used to such an extent throughout the world that we may well ask what was used before its discovery.
Before 1950, plastic was barely a part of American life.
Oh, it's not showing up.
So how did our culture become so plastic?
I know we did too. Hang on.
Modern plastic didn't really get its start until World War II, when the military realized how versatile it could be.
If you're old enough to remember the old-fashioned glass windscreens, this is what happened when you banged your nut.
All right, just a second. Technical glitch. Oh, it won't come up, will it? I'm pressing the monitor, the button that says monitor, right? To go up for the video.
Yeah, you might want to just close this.
It's not changing anything.
Oh, you're right.
Okay. Well, we can do other things. Such a good video.
What is this here?
That's another PowerPoint. It's okay. We'll just let that go.
Shoot.
No big deal. No big deal. You guys didn't want to do homework anyway, right? I know. All right. I'll tell you the answers. Let's get back here. Okay. Okay. I know. All right, so I was gonna, okay, we're gonna skip all this stuff from the video, and I'll just tell you all the answers, okay? It's less fun, but. All right, so when we unpack this problem, okay, we think about the biophysical and the social and the institutional. I'm gonna unpack this now from a different perspective in terms of this is not just a problem about mismanaged trash, right? We're going back to our turtle now, thinking about what's the popular notion of the problem, okay? So we have to think about more than just mismanaged trash or disposal problems. Let's go back to a problem with plastics that's about extraction, okay? And I'd like you to help me think about the social, the biophysical, and the institutional related to this, okay? So, I'm not sure if you are aware of the origin of plastics, but basically, oil companies had waste gases like ethylene coming out of the stacks where they were producing, in the refineries producing oil. And chemists discovered they could use those gases as building blocks or monomers to create novel polymers like PET, which is a kind of plastic that we have in water bottles and polyesters and these kinds of things. And instead of working only with polymers that existed in nature, they started to use this waste gas. Anything and everything could be made from this plastic, made of plastic, and so it was that plastic was cheap because it was this waste, this byproduct of something that was already being produced, right? So the point I want to make about extraction as a part of the problem is that as demand for fossil fuels as an energy source declines over time, plastic production represents a lifeline to the fossil fuel industry. Why is this a problem? Of course, all of the problems of fossil fuel extraction and transportation, from oil spills to groundwater pollution, mountaintop removable coal mining, which impacts Appalachian communities, the oil spills that we're all familiar with, all of that comes along for the ride because of this lifeline. Emissions from this fossil fuel extraction, there are air pollutants within it that are greenhouse gases as well. So we're talking about benzene, xylene, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, ozone, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and volatile organic compounds, things that are not good for our health and not good for the environment. And of course, not to mention methane gas, which is a very potent greenhouse gas, stronger than carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde. These are among the chemicals pumped into the air from natural gas drilling sites. So my point here is that raw material extraction for plastic indirectly supports the fossil fuel industry, which is at the core of the reason we're experiencing global climate change. So if we think through this, can anybody think about what I just said in terms of extraction? What are some of the variables related to biophysical, social, or institutional here? Sorry? Jobs, yes, absolutely. So the whole boom that we went through in terms of the plastic industry, right, produced a lot of jobs. It produced a lot of things that were useful for us, right, that make our lives better. And so if we're talking about removing this as a source of a resource, then we're talking about potentially removing jobs, unless those industries can convert and those workers can convert to something different. Mm-hmm. What else is at play here? Pollution, right? I mean, we just said that that's both a biophysical thing in terms of influencing the environment, but it's also something that's social, right? If you think about the communities that are usually near refineries or usually near mining sites, these are low socioeconomic status communities. This is an environmental justice issue, right? Plastic contributes to the impoverished environment for underrepresented people in this world. Anything else? Institutionally? Healthcare, right, exactly. It's a huge cost to all of us, really. What about institutional variables? Regulations, right. So I think my thoughts go to this struggle that we constantly see between industry, oil industry, right, and the desire to try to regulate that more, and the struggle between that, right, lobbyists and people who are trying to legislate on these topics. These are all variables. Beyond extraction, let's think about production. So converting the fossil fuels into plastic requires large chemical processing plants which emit a variety of pollutants into their air, affecting communities and workers. In addition to emissions from the extraction process, refining fossil fuels and processing them into plastics can create even more toxic emissions. For example, during production, PVC plants can release dioxins. You've probably heard of dioxins. They're known carcinogens that bioaccumulate. They build up in organic matter in humans and wildlife, and they're associated with reproductive and immune system disorders. And even production of supposedly safe plastics, the kind used to create clear plastic water bottles, require the use of chemicals that are derivatives of highly carcinogenic chemical benzene, which is derived from crude oil, right, which we talked about just a second ago. Again, thinking back to the environmental justice side of this, for example, residents of Gulf communities where these chemicals are produced are regularly exposed to disproportionate levels of benzene and other carcinogenic chemicals above safe standards. This is all based on research. So again, we have a problem not just with disposal and now not just with extraction, but here we're talking about production of plastics. Okay, this is really the one that I think a lot of people are interested in thinking about right now, which is the problem of consumption, right? As we now know, microplastics are an issue. I think a few years ago, the big thing was BPA and having BPA in your plastics, particularly. It was in all of our kids' little sippy cups, and was that safe or not? Well, now the biggest concern is microplastics. So there are some really interesting studies that have come out. I hope you've finished your lunch. I'm going to refer to some that are not quite appetizing. But recently, you might have heard that there was a study that came out from the Medical University of Vienna, which looked at 8 individuals from across the world and found in stool samples microplastics in everyone. So we know now that microplastics are making it into the human body. What they do there, whether they stick around within our bodies, all of this kind of research is yet to be done. The small study examined participants from Europe, Japan, and Russia, and the PI for the project basically says that more research needs to be done, but this is alarming, and I think you would agree with me. Chelsea Rockman is an ecologist at the University of Toronto who studies the effects of microplastics on fish, and she says, "I'd say microplastics in poop is not surprising. For me, it shows that we are eating our waste. Mismanagement has come back to us on our dinner plates, and yes, we need to study how it may affect humans." Previous studies on fish have also found plastics in the gut. Microplastics have been found in tap water around the world. In fact, one of my graduate students told me this morning that her risk assessment course in SPIA, her project was to test water samples from across Bloomington, and in all the water samples from the tap, they found microplastics. In the oceans, we have microplastics, and in flying insects, we have microplastics. A recent investigation in Italy found microplastics present in soft drinks, in birds. There's the image that is iconic. The ingestion of plastic has been found to remodel the tiny finger-like projections inside their small intestines, disrupting iron absorption and adding stress on their livers. This is most disturbing to me. Microplastics have been found in beer and salt, these good things. The smallest microplastic particles are capable of entering the bloodstream, the lymphatic system, and may even reach the liver, according to the researchers in Vienna who suggested, again, more research is needed, but they're small enough, theoretically, to reach these systems. Now that we have the first evidence for microplastics inside humans, we need further research to understand what this means for human health. Plastic particles in the gut could affect the digestive system, the immune response, or could aid the transmission of toxic chemicals and pathogens. I promise we're going to be done with all this sad stuff in a minute, and we're going to think about solutions. But lastly, disposal. So this is where we get the story of the turtle, right? We think about the mismanagement of the waste of plastic. So plastic stays around for hundreds of years or more. Unfortunately, only 9% of the plastic ever produced gets recycled. The majority ends up in landfills or in the environment. In fact, 8 million tons of plastic enter our waterways each year. All that plastic is starting to show up in unexpected places, like we just talked about. This photo is a picture from Bangladesh where a family is collecting plastics and sorting clear from green so that they can actually try to make some money from a scrap dealer. Many families are in these situations and they make about $100 a month doing this kind of work, but they make a very tiny dent in the problem. A similar situation to one that is in the photo is in Manila in the Philippines in the Pasig River. This was a treasured waterway to the city and a civic point of pride. It is now listed as one of the top 10 rivers in the world that convey plastics to the ocean. As many as 72,000 tons flow downstream each year, mostly during the monsoon season. The river is fed by 51 tributaries, some of them overflowing with plastic waste from squatter settlements. A tributary near Chinatown in Manila, where there are rickety shanties all along the river, is so choked with plastic debris that you can forego the footbridge and literally walk across the river in plastic. The Philippines is a densely populated nation of 105 million people, and it struggles with basic sanitation issues. So it's really no surprise that it has trouble managing the explosion of plastic garbage. Manila has a metropolitan garbage collection system that stretches across 17 separate local governments, a source of chaos and inefficiency. In 2004, the region was already running out of land to safely and effectively dump garbage. The waste that clogs Manila's beaches and waterways consists largely of sachets. So these are these tear-off packets, you know what I'm talking about? They're single-use shampoo or lotion. Apparently, these are very useful for these kinds of families who can't afford to buy a large bottle or large quantity of any of these kinds of items. They're sold by the millions to poor people, and they're not recyclable. So no waste picker will retrieve them, like this family. They fall like leaves in Manila, according to Laura Parker's article. When there was a cleanup of a waterway by Greenpeace recently, and they posted a tally of the brand names of the sachets that the volunteers had collected. Nestle ranked first and Unilever second. And so the argument is that litter bugs aren't the only ones at fault. We believe that the ones producing and promoting the use of single plastics have a major role in the whole problem. A Unilever spokeswoman told Laura that the company is developing a recyclable sachet. In this situation, I think you clearly see all of those things we just talked about, right? All of the biophysical variables that are at play here. You see the institutional with the government and its inability to manage across different government systems the waste stream, right? And you see also the role of poverty in all of the problem as well. Okay, let's think about solutions, right? This is what we need to do with a problem that is so complex. There are lots of potential solutions, but where do we intervene to make a big impact? We need a leverage point. I go back to an article by Donella Meadows quite often when I'm trying to think about solutions. And Danella's article basically talks about the fact that leverage points are these places where we can intervene in a system and make a big change. And she outlines in order from the top is 9 down to 1, 1 being the most impactful kind of leverage point, okay? So at the top you see that we can change things about constants, parameters, and numbers, right? So we can put a tax on something or subsidize something. That's effective, but not as effective as moving down the list, changing the material flow and the node of material intersection, number 6. Or further down the list, a more effective thing would be to have rules in the system that create incentives or have punishments associated with them or constrain people's choices. And then further down, you see the top 3. The distribution of power over the rules of the system is significantly important. Number 2, changing the goals of the system is a leverage point. And number 1, changing the mindset or paradigm out of which the system arises. So changing its goals, the power structure, the rules, and its culture. So I want to think about solutions. Government, intergovernmental agreements that have teeth, regulation, these are solutions. Let me give you some examples of what's happening in this regard. Kenya joined a growing list of nations that have banned plastic bags, imposing steep fines and jail times on violators. France said it would ban plastic plates and cups by 2020. Bans on plastic microbeads have been coming about in the cosmetics industry, taking effect by regulations in the US, in Canada, and the UK, and 4 other countries. The city of Seattle, like we said earlier, has banned straws and utensils made of plastics, and violators are subject to fines of $250. It's not a small time. There have been calls for international agreements, so intergovernmental solutions, patterned after the Paris Climate Accord. At a meeting in Nairobi in December, 193 nations, including the US, actually passed one, the United Nations Clean Seas Agreement. It doesn't impose a tax on plastic, It's non-binding, it's rather toothless, but it's a declaration of good intention, the intention to end ocean plastic pollution. And Norway's environmental minister called this new agreement a strong first step, but obviously everybody's saying we need teeth to these kinds of agreements. Ted Siegler, a Vermont resource economist who has spent more than 25 years working with developing nations on garbage, says, everyone wants a sexy answer, but the reality is we need to just collect the trash. Most countries that I work in, you can't even get it off the street. We need garbage trucks and help institutionalizing the fact that this waste needs to be collected on a regular basis, landfilled, recycled, and dealt with, right? So that is a public good, right? So we could look to our public institutions, our governments, to help us do this kind of thing. So go back to your leverage points and see that we have material flows, nodes of material intersection being influenced by the government's leverage, right? Also the rules of the system, right? By creating regulations, we're changing the rules of the system. You want me to hurry up, don't you? Okay, quickly, we'll go through these. Corporations, industries can produce alternative products, and they could actually be taxed. This has been proposed. So alternative products are plastics. There are plastics that are out there that are actually made of cellulose that can be composted, right? Why are we not using those that break down? So the industry could shift to this, could innovate and make this their alternative product. Likewise, there's been a proposal that we tax industries who are in plastics, so that, for example, I don't know, a penny for every ton that they produce of plastic could go back to these developing nations to support, in terms of finances, support their ability to collect the trash, recycle it, and landfill it appropriately, which would be a stopgap for the movement of the plastics to the ocean, right? So again, here, we're changing. By using taxes, we're changing constants, parameters, and numbers. We're changing the material flow if we change to an alternative product. And really, we're changing the goal of the system, right? If all of the industries can look to a new product and say, this is where we're going. All right, almost done. Individuals, leaders, who are leaders, and organizations that educate and lobby can make a big difference. And these are people like you might have heard of, Boyan Slat. He's a 23-year-old from the Netherlands who is charging ahead, cleaning up the largest garbage patch in the North Pacific in the ocean and doing a lot of education work with it. So what is he doing? Someone like him, he's changing information flow, right? He's educating people. He's making great YouTube videos about his products and what they can do. And he's gained $30 million, I think, already for his system. He's changing the goals of the system, and I think most importantly, shifting the paradigm, changing people's mindsets about what's possible, particularly when, it's a teenager that came up with the ideas, right? Okay, it's cheesy, but I'm gonna end with you. You are part of the solution, right? And here, my argument is this. Again, it's the same as being a leader as an individual, right? You can inform other people about what you now know about plastics or what you already knew. You can help change the goals of the system in your own world. So maybe your Rotary Club wants to do something related to, choosing alternative products that you use at your events. Maybe you ban plastics at your events, right? That's something you can have as a goal. You're changing the goal. And then when you do that and people see that, all the people that are around you in your life, you are shifting paradigm. You are shifting the norms, the social norms, that plastic is just not okay. It's not a good choice anymore, and we have alternatives, right? Lastly, I just wanted to point out that individuals are making a difference right here in our community. The Youth Environmental Leadership Summit that I shared with you, we have all these kids who come here, and 3 different high schools brought to our conference a problem from their community that had to do with plastic. One of the schools the students weren't able to bring their reusable water bottles. They had to use plastic water bottles in school. And they came up with some solutions. They went back to their principal and they outlined the reasons that shouldn't be the case and what are alternatives for it. So I just wanted to share with you a hopeful note that there are youth who are thinking about this kind of thing. So I think at the very least, all of us who are in positions that are a little bit more powerful than these kids, we can certainly do something too as well and use those leverage points. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for being here and speaking to us today. As is our custom, we'll be making a contribution to the Interfaith Winter Shelter in recognition of you being here today and speaking to us. So thank you. Next week, we have our program. Brian Shockney, the CEO of Bloomington Hospital, will be here. And thought for the week: we make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. Appropriate for today from Mr. Winston Churchill. So thank you all. Hope you guys have a great week. And now rise and join me in the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do, first is the truth. Second is bearing all concern. Third will build goodwill and better friendships. Fourth will be beneficial to all concerned. And fifth is fun. Have a great week, everybody. Stay warm.